Introducing 100 Days of Code with Treehouse. What is 100 Days of Code? It's a long-standing coding challenge created by Alex Callaway, and it's simple. Commit to learning every day for 100 days. The amount that you learn in that short time frame will change your life. Whether you want to level up your skills or jumpstart a new career, commit to the challenge. You'll be shocked by how much you learn and accomplish. You'll have the full support of the Treehouse community of students working with you. We'll be sending you motivational emails, clips from our 100 Days of Code podcast, featuring advice, tips and tricks from developers, and so much more. There's never been a better time to commit to your learning. Join us.
Hello everybody, my name is Jonathan. I'm a full-stack web developer and instructor here at Treehouse. Today we have Python data analysis with Jupyter Notebook, Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. So let's take a look at what we have here today. So who is this live stream for? Business analysts, data analysts with a basic understanding of Python. So not too much Python is going to be required today. And the next part is talking about Excel experts. And aspiring data scientists and statisticians who already use Jupyter Notebooks. So in this case, if you know a little bit of Python or you use Excel already for data science or data analysis, then this live stream is for you. So let's see what we have. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about virtual environments for data science. We have different packages and there's different reasons, so definitely check out all this information. But what I'm going to talk about here is the different options. So virtual env is part of pip and is sort of the older sort of virtual environment, and pipenv is the newer version. PyEnv, so let's talk about Anaconda, which is what we're going to use today. It's also a virtual environment, but it's pre-installed with data science libraries. And that's why we're going to use it today, because you don't have to go out and use pip install to install all the different packages. And I'm going to show you how you can just list project or module names when you create the virtual environment all at once. And you can actually share your virtual environment with other people. So it's sort of like, it's great for collaboration as well. Okay, so what you're going to need first is to set up Anaconda. So let's talk about that. So there's a couple ways to do this. So let me get this set up over here. Okay, so let's go through the installation process. Let me give you some more screen real estate here. All right, so where are we? I think get started will take us to the download section. All right, here we go. Okay, so I'm on a Mac, and so what I would recommend is to do the graphical installer for Python 3.7. Okay, so after you do that, let's go back to the repo here. Then you should be able to access Conda. So let's go ahead and go to the terminal. So I'm already in my preferred working directory. So if I type in pwd, I'm in my documents folder, and I created another folder called virtual _envs. So let's see what's in here. Okay, so there's a Jupyter Notebook, and I've already created a virtual environment. So let's talk about that, and then I'll show you how I got mine working. Let's see where we are. Okay, so this is the command that I used. And so I'm not going to enter this because I've already done that, but I'll sort of take you through the steps. So this is the cool part I was mentioning before. all you have to do is just add the packages that you want to include it in this virtual environment. So here we have notebook is for Jupyter Notebooks, pandas is pandas library, and matplotlib includes NumPy, so we don't have to add NumPy. It's included, and Seaborn is going to be for visualization at the end. We're going to talk about plotting, and you could actually add Django if you wanted as well. And if you don't install these packages or modules now, you can do so later with pip install as well. Okay, so I'm not going to be installing this, but I am going to show you, let's see what the repo says. So, okay, conda deactivate. So I have to activate my project. And so Python _data _analysis is my project. So here it says base. That's letting you know that we have Conda installed. So once you install Conda and you start up your terminal, you should see base. And to activate the virtual environment that I've created, which is that previous command, we're going to use this command, conda activate, and then the name of the virtual environment, which I named Python _data analysis. So let's go ahead and activate that. Great. And now you can tell that we've activated that because instead of saying base, it now says Python data analysis. Okay, so now we're ready to start Jupyter Notebooks. Great, so let's go to, all right, so let's talk a little bit about this. This is the Jupyter Notebook that I've already created. Now, if you wanted to create a new one, you'd go over here and click new, but you wouldn't see these two kernels. These are kernels that I created. This is the one that I created this is the kernel, I should say, that is part of the virtual environment. And this is another kernel for another virtual environment that I created. However, if you haven't installed these, then you're only going to probably see Python 3. And what does that mean? So when you create a new notebook, you'd be using the Python 3 kernel and not the kernel from your virtual environment. So how do you do that, right? Okay, let's talk about that. I have those instructions here. All right. So if you didn't include notebook here, you could also install it with pip install notebook. So to install the IPI kernel, which is what's going to give us that kernel, you just use pip install IPI kernel. And once you do that, you're going to use this command to attach it, to connect it to the Jupyter Notebook instance. And so what are these commands? So first of all, install user name, and this is your virtual environment name. And here is the display name in case you wanted it to be different for some reason, where this is going to show up here in Jupyter Notebook right here. This is the display name. I chose to create the same name as my folder. Okay, so where are we now? All right. So we already opened Jupyter Notebook, and now let's type conda env list. I'll create, well, you know what? I'll close this for a second, and then we'll do this again. Conda, and I'm going to list my environments, virtual environments. Okay, so here I have live stream testing, which I was using to do some testing for this live stream. And here is my Python _data _analysis virtual environment, which I'm using, and I'm still have it activated, and that's denoted by the parentheses here. Okay, so let's start up Jupyter Notebook again. All right, so let's head back there. Okay. So there's one more thing that we could talk about. Yeah, so we didn't talk about this. So let me just go ahead and talk about it. We're not going to do that right now, but you can export your virtual environment. So once you do that, you can just share that file with anybody on your team, and all they have to do is once they have that file in the virtual environment, they run this command, and it basically spawns an exact copy of the virtual environment. This is a really great thing for collaboration and working on teams, because one of the greatest things is that you don't have to worry about having the right version of dependencies. And so this brings up an important point. We were talking about earlier about the differences between pip, Anaconda, and PyEnv. So let's just recapitulate this before we move forward. It's pretty straightforward. So pip is really great as a package manager to install packages one at a time. And you can also use a virtual environment or pipenv, which doesn't have data science modules and libraries included, unlike Anaconda, which does. PyEnv is great for managing both pipenv and Anaconda. And those are for cases where you have to try out different versions of Python and go back and forth and trying different versions of dependencies. And that's kind of hard to do without PyEnv. But now that if that's something that you're sort of going to be doing in your workflow, I would suggest checking out PyEnv. All right, so where are we? So now I just want to talk about that before we move forward. And now we're going to check out our Jupyter Notebook. And you should also have, when you click New, you should now have your own kernel. So I'm not going to, if I did do this, I would create a new notebook, but I'm not going to do that because I've already created a notebook using that kernel here. So I'm just going to click on this and we're going to open up the notebook. All right, so let me give you some screen back. All right, so let's get started with this. Okay, so first things first. Let's import pandas as PD, which is a pretty common, PD is what most people use for the imports, very common. You'll see that a lot. And now we're going to import NumPy. Remember, we didn't have to actually import this when we created the virtual env because it's part of matplotlib. And we're going to import this as NP. And now in Jupyter Notebook, you want to hit Shift Enter. And if you saw that really quickly, right here where the 1 is, there was a little asterisk. So that was it processing or importing pandas and NumPy. Great. So now that we have pandas and NumPy imported, let's create some test data. So how do we do that? We're going to create, let's see, we're going to use NumPy. And first I'm going to create a variable, test data equals, and then we're going to use NumPy, and we're going to use this right here, this random.randint. And if you want to learn more about that, just click on that, and this will sort of go into all of the different specifics about this. But I'm just going to show you how it works through Jupyter Notebook. So random, and we want randint. And we want from numbers 1 through 100, and we want 25 of these. Shift Enter. Okay. Let's see what I did. Okay, so let me test data. Okay, so now we've assigned the random integer to test underscore data. So let's return that. And all you have to do is just write test data. And since we're in Jupyter Notebook, shift return, and there's our test data. So if we wanted to have 100 numbers, you would just add 100 here. So what these are is basically saying from 1 to 100. And in this case, we're going to say now that we want 100 of those numbers. Okay. So let's run that test data again. And now there's 100 numbers. So, and it's pretty clean. They're just integers. But how about if we wanted to create some star rating test data? Then we could use linspace for that. And again, if you want to know about the details, just click on this link and it'll give you all of the details about the parameters. Great, so let's create some test data. This time we'll call it data. And we will use NumPy again and linspace. We're going to ask for numbers from 1 to 100 again, and let's do 1 to 5, right? So it's star ratings, and then we'll get 25 of those numbers. Shift return. Spell that. So linspace. Yeah, that's how you spell it. Cool. All right, so now return data. All right, so there's our numbers, our test data. So what we have is linspace evenly distributes the numbers 1 through 5, and it looks a little bit messy, so let's go ahead and round that off. So to round that off, we can use a round like this. So data is now going to be equal to, and we're going to use NumPy and a round, which is going to wrap our linspace like this. And this last number here will be, let's say 2 integer spaces, so 2 decimal places. Let's return that data. And all we have to do again is just data, shift return. And now we have 2 decimal spaces after. So let's change this to 1. I think it'll look a little bit cleaner. Shift return. Yeah, so that looks a little bit cleaner. So we have 1, so it's a floating point number with 1 decimal place after the decimal. Okay, so moving on, what is pandas? Let me go over here. So what is pandas? Pandas is a data analysis tool built on top of Python. And what is a pandas series? So my whole goal here in this live stream, and especially in this first one, is to compare pandas with an Excel spreadsheet. So a pandas series is a one-dimensional labeled array that holds any data type, that being an integer. Let me get out of there. If you double click on it, it'll open that up and you have markdown. So you can take an integer, a string, float, Python objects, and more. In short, a pandas series is nothing but a column in an Excel sheet. Okay, that's a pretty heavy statement. So let's make one and take a look. Okay, so let me get you some more screen real estate here. All right, so let's make pandas. So we're making a series, so let's do this. And now we're going to use pandas instead of NumPy. And series is a capital S. And we're going to pass our variable of data. And what is that? Basically these numbers. Okay, so we're going to type, so we're going to use the command Shift Enter to process that, and then to return the series, all we have to do, just like before, is return the series, Shift Enter, like this. And that does, I have to say, it does look like Excel now, right? Because you can see that there's an index on the left, and then you have 1 column. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. But the one thing that you're going to notice that's different is that we're starting with a 0. That's a very, sort of programmer sort of things, programming language, it's zero-based index, but let's try to return an index that starts with 1. Okay, so let me give you some more screen real estate. All right, so let's set the index. So the way we can do that is series.index equals series.index plus 1. And we're just going to return the series like this. Perfect. So now instead of the zero-based index from 0 to 24, we have 1 to 25. And we can sort of do things with this now. So like one of the most common things is you could say mean. Search for mean. And in this case, it's 3. You can also say, whereas number 3, it's 13. So we can return that same series by index like this. Oh, I meant 13. Okay, so let's try 13. And we have the same exact one, so 3. Okay, so series are one-dimensional, right? So what does that mean? So it means it's one column. So we can also use series shape, which allow us to, you can see how big it is. So in this case, it shows you that it's 25, meaning there's 25 numbers and there's one column. So there's nothing here. So what is a data frame? All right, great question. Speaking of questions, this is an interactive session. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask a question and Karen will field that question for us. She's great. So feel free to reach out and I'm more than happy to answer any of these questions. Okay, so what is a data frame? The long answer is a two-dimensional, size-mutable, potentially heterogeneous tubular data structure with label axes. Basically, that is rows and columns. And so now we're going to get into how this looks more and more like an Excel spreadsheet, okay? So it's like rows and columns. So the simplicity here is that a series is one column and a data frame is rows and columns. So let's get into that now. Okay, so we're going to create a two-dimensional data frame. That's our first task. And we're going to use the variable df for data frame. And we're going to use pandas for that. And data frame is capitalized title case. And we're going to pass data, which is the variable that we've been using. And we're going to give a title to the column. Let's say it's ratings, because we're using the star ratings. Okay, so that looks good. So let's enter that. And now we want to return df to return our data frame. Let's go ahead and do that now. And we'll take a look. All right, so this is starting to look more like Excel. Again, we have the zero-based index, so let's go ahead and fix that. Okay. So this time we're going to use df. Let me get a new line here. df.index equals df.index plus 1. And then we want to return that index just by typing df. Cool. And we have our index. And why is that 3? I think I might have, done this a couple times. There we go. So you got to be careful. You don't want to call it more than one time. So if you were at 0 and you added 1, you'd be at 1. Okay, so that's it for our live stream today. But this is an ongoing live stream. So let me bring the camera back on here. This is an ongoing live stream. So this will probably be 2 or 3 sessions. So for next live stream, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us either through, I guess you could do that through Treehouse or the links that we left up here, or you can reach me on Twitter at _Jonathan_codes. And let's see, I think that's it for today. Yeah, so if you have any questions, reach out. And next Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll continue with pandas and data frames, and we'll get into Seaborn as well. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. Stay safe. And until next time, happy coding. Bye-bye.